Today, we're diving into the topic of article writing, more specifically, how you can become a much more prolific writer. In this episode, I help Liz improve her article writing speed by 300%. Or at least I think it's 300%. Liz went from 2 to 3 articles a month to writing 3 articles per week by using the tips in this episode. The reason I know her results is because the interview was recorded a few weeks back. We also did a follow-up episode which will be released in the next few weeks. So if you want to become a more prolific writer without sacrificing quality, the tips in this episode really work. So I'm sure you're curious about what the tips are, so let's dive into the episode. I'm here with Liz Seda, and today we're going to be covering how to write articles faster and how to become more prolific writer. So she's basically gonna ask me some questions, and we're gonna have a conversation about article writing and writing awesome stuff. So how are you doing, Liz?
I'm great, Henry. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So I guess the first question I have, or the first 3 questions is, who are you, what do you do, and which was your favorite Star Wars movie?
Star Wars movie. Gosh, I'm such a big nerd. What a great question. My favorite Star Wars movie by far is the first one. And actually, I don't know if you heard, Henry, but Disney just bought the rights to Star Wars, even though George Lucas said that he would never sell them to anybody ever. And now they can make more movies, Star Wars movies. Isn't that crazy?
Awesome. I hope they don't ruin it. Do you know how much they paid for that? It's kind of priceless.
I know, right? You would think that it was priceless, but apparently it isn't. So I have no idea. Just an extraordinary amount of money, I would imagine. So, but Disney does a pretty good job with movies. Anyway.
Yeah, hopefully.
Sorry about that. And I'm Liz, like Henry said. I run a blog called A Life on Your Terms, and I write about how to live according to your values, your beliefs, and your desires, and how to figure out what your values and beliefs are. So that's what I do.
Awesome stuff. So when you said first Star Wars movie, do you mean the first one of the new ones or the old ones?
The first one of the old ones, of course.
Awesome. So where do you want to start with this?
Well,
With article writing.
With article writing? Yeah. Okay, so I would like to start with how you can sit down and write one piece of content, let's say 600 words or so, in a reasonable amount of time. How you can do that without agonizing over the structure of the post, over the wording, and any tips that you have to just write more quickly and not be so critical, I think, because it really takes me a long time. You know, when I sit down to write a blog post, it could take me a really long time just to even get started. And even while writing, I tend to stop and go back. And although I've tried to do free writing, just write without stopping, I seem to not have the willpower. So do you have any tips for that?
So do you outline your post before you do free writing?
I don't.
Yeah, I get that. That's usually my problem. If I do just free writing, it's kind of like it goes all over the place, and then I start feeling bad about it because I started about, say, blogging, and now I'm talking about tea and maybe babies and squirrels.
Yeah.
So what I do is I start with the headline. So I come up with a good headline or a good angle, and I try to always focus on one idea per article, unless it's like a list post.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have the headline, I get an outline in place.
Okay.
And the basic, if I don't know what I want to cover in the outline, I just start with the basic questions like what, why, when, how, what if, like mistakes and worries people have, and examples.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And
yeah.
Let's take an example. So if I say, let's see, no examples are coming up. So do you have any questions?
No, I think it's really interesting actually that you say if you have like a title idea, but you don't know what the outline is going to be, asking those questions can really help. And, I mean, I guess I shouldn't really say it, but I haven't I haven't thought about it that way before. So that is really helpful for me.
Yeah, and when I have the outline in place, it really helps me just write and dump whatever information I have in my brain and get the first draft done, because one of the, at least for me, important parts of writing content fast and getting like 3 to 5 articles written in a day is to be able to write a horrible first draft, which everyone is able to write a horrible first draft.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what, Henry? Speaking about that horrible first draft, sometimes I do it. Sometimes I push through it and I try to write the horrible first draft, but it's so bad that I can't bring myself to continue because I feel like such a failed writer that I just look back at it and cringe. And I'm sure that I'm just going to end up homeless on the street because nobody will ever read anything that I write again. And it's like I can't even stand to look at it. How would you battle that?
Well, I have the same thing, but what calms me down is that the first draft is the first draft. And what I do with my articles is I outline them, I write the first draft, which is usually pretty horrible, and then I sleep on things. So I let the article be for 24 hours, and I know I'll come back and rewrite the article at least 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes me feel a lot better about writing the horrible first draft because it helps me write faster, and I know I'll come back to it in 24 hours and then later in 24 hours more to put in the last tweaks.
Right. So when you talk about, writing something like 3 to 5 articles even a day, would you recommend keeping a list of articles that you want to write or a general list of ideas that you want to write about? Or do you kind of schedule it and say, these are the articles that I'm going to write this day and then this day and then that day? Which one do you think is more effective?
Well, I'm kind of all over the place, so I tend to do whatever I'm feeling at in the moment. Now, I still gather ideas in Evernote, so I have headlines that are inspiring or things that are intriguing to me. But I have that list there, but I almost never go back and use it. So what happens to me is I get a question from a reader or a client, and it inspires me to write an article, and that's when I write an article.
Oh, I see. Interesting. So, oh, okay. All right. Because I have tried to, in my editorial calendar, schedule articles in advance. And I find that when I get to that day that I'm supposed to, publish that article, that, it's just not resonating with me anymore for some reason. And so it almost never works out. And I just end up writing about something different. And so that's normal.
Yeah, I have the same thing actually. But I've started, like, as long as I can get my inspiration out on paper and get the article done in a few days, I generally feel good about it, and when I publish it, it usually does well. But if I try to write about something just because it doesn't really feel good because I don't feel inspired. And there are times, I'd say maybe in 10% of the articles I write, where I start the article and then I just run out of fuel and I stop. Then I may come back the next day and finish the article, or I may just leave it as it is. And then maybe sometimes a year later, I have this idea like, I started that article a year ago and now I want to finish it. But that rarely happens. So basically my thing is doing what I feel good about doing. So I'm not tied down to any rules or any systems. Mm-hmm. So I'll just write whatever inspires me. And what really helps me write fast is having structure. So like I said, having the outline, writing the headline, writing the horrible first draft, and then sleeping on the article or waiting 24 hours and then rewriting.
Right. Okay. So what about when you want to write a blog post for a guest blog, and say you want to write it for Dumb Little Man, so they accept all kinds of posts, right? However, you don't have necessarily the freedom to just kind of be who you are, like you would on your blog, because you kind of want to match their tone, right? You want to match their tone, their structure, for their audience. So when you're doing something like that and your inspiration is a little bit less fueled by fire and more fueled kind of by, I guess you can say, structure, and it's a little bit more difficult to be inspired, how do you handle that?
I think that's interesting because I tend to be inspired to write those posts as well, but they're in a different kind of way. So for Dumb Little Man, it's mostly like personal development content about setting goals. So what I would do is start by thinking about the good headline, which might be 7 big mistakes people make when setting goals.
Mm-hmm.
And for Dumb Little Man, I just write from my experience. And those are the articles that tend to be very different from the ones on Dumb Little Man. So I might go back in their archives and check out what people have written about. And then I just put in the 7 biggest mistakes I see that are very different from what other people write about, because we all have our unique perspective.
Right.
And it's interesting to think about because sometimes I can just write an article without feeling extremely inspired. But when I get the headline down, when I do the outline and I just free write it, I just dump whatever I have out on paper, I usually just get inspired anyway.
Okay.
So it's kind of like when you start, you get inspired, and sometimes you're inspired and then you start.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. That does help. So also another thing about writing is that, especially when you're first starting out, you want to do a lot of guest blogging and, you want to do guest blogging in your niche, but sometimes you also want to target blogs that are really big that may or may not be directly related to your niche. So let's say pro blogger, coffee blogger, I wouldn't say that those are, personal development blogs. So when you're researching for a topic for those niches, like, do you find that it's much harder for you to come up with something to write about? Because I know that it's really hard for me to come up with something that I can write about and that I really believe in. And so I haven't even attempted going to those blogs yet. But I was wondering what you thought about that.
Well, I think there's always a place to write motivational and inspirational content, even if it's for copy blogger or pro blogger. But let's take, for example, one post I wrote for ProBlogger a while back. It was about product creation mistakes or product launching mistakes, something along those lines. And I simply took something that came from my experience, and that's always a post that's easy for me to write. So I just wrote about the mistakes I've made or that I see my clients and customers make, and that became the post.
Right. So when in doubt, go back to, your experience in something in that niche. Like, you don't have to do a ton of research to pump out a post for one of those blogs. You can almost always go back to a personal experience.
Yeah, because to me, what makes people interesting is their story. And when I read articles, what draws me in are personal stories, especially if someone has done something, failed at it, and then figured out a way how to do something. Like if I'm interested in learning how to publish books for the Kindle, then it's going to be interesting to read someone else's story instead of just 7 tips for Kindle success. That's kind of boring.
Right, got you. Okay.
But you can still do like the research piece and blend in your own story, because that just makes it all the more powerful.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And so what about when you're finished writing your article and you look back and you still don't like it and you have no idea what to do to make it better? It just feels like blah to you. Like you read it and you're just like, it's nothing really bad, but you just, ugh. Do you just throw it away?
Sometimes I throw it away, but often I just take a break and come back to it the next day. So when this happens to you, are you like struggling with a deadline, or do you need to get it done right there?
No. Usually it's just, I don't know, it happens randomly and I'm done with it. And I look at it and I'm just like, I don't really like it that much. And then, even if I do come back to it, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I still don't like it. Yeah, and then I leave again, come back, and I still don't like it. And nothing. It seems as if no editing can make it better for me. And I maybe is it me just being a perfectionist? I just kind of want things to happen right away.
So have you ever tried publishing a post like this?
No.
Because in the past, I've had posts where I thought this is not good at all, and I've done experiments because I always like to challenge any assumptions we have, because even though you may think it's not good, it may be perfectly good for someone else. And it surprises me because when I do my best, I just rewrite the thing, make sure it makes sense, it's simple and down to earth, and all the things that I do. And even though I may not feel that it's awesome or it feels wrong, as long as it's good enough, I sometimes publish it and then see what happens. And often people just say, this was exactly what I needed to hear at this moment, and this was awesome. And it's weird because it just goes to show that we're not always the best judges of our own work.
That is such a good point, Henry, because I have published posts where after I was done, I was like, this is so epic. Like, I cannot wait to get it out to the world tomorrow. And then I publish it, and response is just like normal. And I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
I was sure that this was awesome. And it wasn't bad, but response was just normal. So that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it in the reverse direction.
Yeah, and that's happened to me as well when I thought something was extremely, like I was satisfied with the article and I felt extremely inspired writing it.
Yeah.
And then the response was lukewarm.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So what about applying the question principle, the what, why, how principle to a post that is supposed to be less informative and more motivational, if that makes sense? So it's not like, this is how to get motivated. It's more like, get motivated right now.
So it's kind of like one of my posts, I think it's called the most empowering post you'll ever read.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be something like that. I mean, not like you're not giving instructions, you're not teaching anybody to do something, you're not even really giving a lot of advice. You're basically writing in a way that gets people kind of pumped up, or some emotion is supposed to be evoked.
Yeah, in those cases, the like what why outline doesn't work at all. And that's when you want to outline but don't follow a structure. Like you're creating the outline and you're figuring out if the post makes sense once it's done. So if I'm writing a motivational or inspirational post, I'll start with the headline and I'll outline the subheadings and see if it makes sense. So it's kind of like I can see I have an overview of the articles. And then if I really want to make sure that it makes sense, I'll put in bullet points below each subheading. So I know what I'm going to cover and if anything needs their own subheading or if a subheading needs to be removed or anything like that. So I'm basically getting an overview of the post before I write it.
Okay, got it. I mean, that does make sense. So, and I also had another question, which is, I think it's kind of unique to me, but I can't be sure. Is that when I'm writing a post, so sometimes I get hit and I just write a post and it's 1,000 words and it just comes like right away. And then sometimes while I'm writing that specific post, I find that I don't like my entire post structure, like what I thought it was going to be, isn't what it turns out to be at all. So in that case, I have to kind of go back and rearrange everything to fit the new idea.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that happens to me. I start with one idea and then things change. Usually I open up a new document or I just do a new outline on a piece of paper. So I don't know why I do this, but I just like the feel of a clean document. So I might use Notepad on Windows or TextEdit in Mac. I just have a clean document and then I do the outline all over again, see where all the pieces fit.
Okay.
So I'm constantly going back to getting an overview and getting a sense of the article before I write it, because often if I just start writing, it just ends up as a mess. But I still do have those inspirational moments where I have a headline and I just write the article from start to finish and figure out the structure when I'm done.
Okay. Awesome. I see. What about what about when you're trying to you're trying to become a faster writer and you want to produce a lot of content, so you kind of want to be a content producing machine. And I know that it's recommended to write every day. And, indeed, I actually do write every day. But do you recommend, writing posts or, actual structured writing every day? Or is any kind of writing okay to do in your opinion, like journal writing or, whatever?
Well, I actually don't write every day.
Really? Wow, that's awesome.
I have some days where I'll feel inspired to write and I'll write 5 articles, and then sometimes I don't write for the whole week because I've started doing more audio like this podcast, and I do video for my courses. So I've started blending things together a lot more. But I'd say that if you want to become a faster writer, just get good at writing and getting your mind out of the way. So get good at the structure part, but also on the free writing part. So get the headline in place, do your outline, then write as fast as you can for your first draft, and then know that you'll come back and rewrite it later. And as long as you keep doing that, you'll get better. Because when I started back in, let's see, 2007 online or late 2006, my articles were pretty horrible. So I've just kept on writing. And something that helped me a lot was when I did article marketing. So I used article marketing to build up affiliate income streams.
Right.
So I think I wrote about 4,000 articles a year or two. And that really forced me to get good at the structure part, because I had to write fast and it had to be high quality. So that really taught me how to write fast and how to get things done. Because if let's say you're on a deadline to write 10 articles every day, like let's say short articles, then you need to get those articles done and you need to get good at getting them done. So it's kind of like you're under pressure.
Yeah.
And you're under pressure to get better, because sometimes people, they write blog posts and there's no need to get better, so people don't get better unless they're really motivated.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is intense. I can't believe that you wrote that many articles, because I know that if I have an experience where I'm writing all day, or I'm under a deadline and so I'm writing, and in the middle of writing I feel like crying because I just don't want to write anymore. Like I get literally upset about the whole thing. Like I don't want to write, but I'm on a deadline. So I just feel like bursting into tears. And so my husband will come in all shocked, and I'm at the computer, holding my nose and trying not to cry. He's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I don't want to write anymore. I have to keep going." And I just find it amazing that you could just keep going. I mean, how do you do that?
I'm not sure. I've always been good at just getting things done. So I think I've always had these experiments where when my mind says, okay, we need to stop, then I've always had this thing where I enjoy just pushing things a little bit further.
Mm.
So for example, if I'm at the gym and I'm lifting a weight and my body is saying, okay, this is the last one, I'll go, okay, let's do 2 more just to see. And usually I can do 2 more. And then sometimes I go, okay, let's do 2 more after those 2, and I can do 2 more.
That is such a good point, Henry, because I do the same thing with exercise. But and you brought another perspective. I never thought about doing it with writing, just, another 100 words, or, just another article if it's small or whatever, just another 10 minutes even. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it comes back to challenging your assumptions, because something that popped up was a lot of writers feel like they aren't good enough, or they don't have anything to tell the world, or they shouldn't share their writing because there seems to be better people out there. And really what it comes down to is having the determination to practice every day and to challenge your assumptions. Because even if you feel you're not good enough, you can always go, well, let's see if I'm not good enough. And
Mm-hmm.
you can write and write more articles and write more articles until you start gaining traction, and then you see you're good enough, and you can kind of, that starts breaking down a lot of other things as well. Because when I started, I didn't feel good enough. I looked at other bloggers, felt like I didn't have anything to share. But after a while, I just thought, well, I'm going to test my assumptions and see what happens. And I started building my audience, and people enjoyed my content. And that's when I started realizing that the thoughts we have are very rarely good representations of what really goes on.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. And I mean, when I first started too, I I came from an academic background, so I wrote very formally, lots and lots of, $10 words. Like if that word wasn't 4 syllables, I didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
I was like, that's not my kind of word. I use big words. And then, I started looking around and realizing that, this kind of thing of beautiful prose wasn't exactly dead because you did still have to use it. However, there was this different style, this new style, this blogging style, that I wasn't familiar with. And so I had to completely change the way I wrote, which was really difficult because I mean, it's how I had written my whole life. And, I thought that I was good at it. And then to kind of start again at the bottom, and like, oh gosh, I'm not good at it. I mean, should I even try? But eventually, I got used to the writing, and I think I enjoy it now even more. I don't have to use my thesaurus as much. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think something that's helped me is that I'm not a native English speaker. So I enjoy using simple words. So I have a big vocabulary in English because I practically do everything in English, but I still enjoy using simple words because they're just much easier when you read. You don't have to think as much, and when you can explain something in simple words, it's just much easier to understand and easier on the brain.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, what is that quote, Henry? Something like, if you can't explain something simply, you can't explain it at all, or something like that. And I think that, yeah, a lot of Native American, um, sorry, a lot of American writers definitely get into their head with our whole vocabulary. And I think you're right. Having a limited amount of words to choose from, not limited, but less, makes it so that you're not agonizing all the time about your wording, I guess you can say, which is something that I do agonize over and over about my wording. Did I say this in the right way? Did I put it in the right order? Does the sentence look okay? And I'm not even sure if you're supposed to go that in depth when you're doing blogging.
Yeah, yeah, and simple is, in my mind, better. And I've gotten tons of feedback from my readers that they really enjoy the simple style because some bloggers are very convoluted and use big words too much. So if people are not sure if they are if you think you're using words that are too simple, you probably could go even simpler because I think it makes your writing more powerful. And when you want to slip in a quote unquote big word, it just makes it that much more powerful.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I think this is also kind of common among personal development bloggers. I mean, at least I find myself doing it a lot, is using metaphors, like forcing metaphors, like trying to explain something, relating it to something else, and it doesn't end up making sense. Like, I don't know, life is like the sky. You just got to be like the clouds,
Yeah.
And you're like, what the heck does that mean? Like, I have no idea what that means. I think I'm gonna give it to my readers and be like, yeah, yeah, life is like the clouds. I get it totally. And so, yeah, simple is better.
Yeah, exactly. Something else that popped up was if people are having trouble writing, sometimes when I really need to get tons of writing done, I'll use something like the Pomodoro technique. Have you
Mm,
heard of that? It's
yeah.
basically just working in 25-minute blocks. So you have a kitchen timer, you set it on 25 minutes, and then you can get stuff done. And what I do is I break my articles down into small pieces. So I might have like brainstorm a headline, come up with a headline, come up with an outline, write the first draft, and I might get all of those done in one 25-minute block, because the thing with Pomodoro is that you do nothing but write. So you can't check Facebook or check Twitter, because then you have to start all over, I think it was. So you do just one thing, and that's something I do if I really need to get stuff done extremely fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I will try that. Because, it kind of goes back to what is this? Is it Parkinson's law or something that, it takes the amount of time that you allot to it or something like that? I can't remember which law it was, but, if you say, I'm going to allot 8 hours to doing this article and that should be more than enough time, then it will take you 8 hours. Whereas if you allot 25 minutes, it'll take you 25 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's Parkinson's law, where the work expands to fill the time you have available.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. That is so helpful, Henry. I can't even tell you.
Awesome. So I think we've covered a lot of stuff. Do you have any remaining questions here?
No, I didn't even know that I had that many questions.
Yeah, you have a few left, actually.
I do?
Yeah, I think 2 questions until it's over.
Okay. 2 questions? Is that all I get? Do I get a phone call to a friend?
Well, you could get extra questions if the questions you asked are very good.
Okay. So how much reading do you do, Henry? Like consuming content, other people's content, and producing your own content, and how does that relate to your writing?
I try not to read too much online content, because it's easy for me to see something on Twitter and then click and read and waste a lot of time. So what I do is, if I see a link on Twitter, I just basically think, do I really need this right now? And 95% of the time, the answer is no. So what I do is, I like to read books instead. And I don't have this thing where I have a goal where I'll read 1 book a week and get tons of books read during the year. So what I do is, I read books when a book stands out. So again, I read books when I feel inspired to read books. So sometimes if I really feel inspired to read something about overcoming fears or something else, then I'll read a book that stands out to me. And it's usually like, if I listen to an interview and someone mentions a book and I feel compelled to get that book, then I'll go over to Amazon, check what it's all about, and read some reviews and see how it feels. So I'm always checking in with myself and checking in with my heart and seeing what I feel inspired to do. So not forcing myself to read stuff.
Okay, got it. Because I know that, a lot of writers say, write and read, write and read, write and read as much as you can. And I do find that although I used to be a really avid reader, I don't get around to reading as often. And I felt like I've been kind of missing out, on something that I can do to improve my craft.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say as long as you feel inspired to read, then read. But if you feel like you're missing out on something and it's something you should do,
right,
then I probably wouldn't bother with it, because if I'm reading because I should be reading, that it's not something that's going to make me feel good.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do the reading until I feel like I want to read.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll also say that it's not just about reading anything, it's about reading high quality stuff. So sometimes I'll feel the urge to read like Stephen King novels, and I have some articles where I read a few of his books back to back, and it really influenced my writing because he has a very descriptive style.
Yeah.
So I started playing with that and incorporating it into my writing. So even if you enjoy reading science fiction or just fiction, it can really improve your writing because it's just a different way of looking at things and it gives you a fresh perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And then if, this will be, I guess you can say, my second question. How do you approach writing blog posts and writing product content? And how are those two different?
Do you mean curated, or what's the word you used?
No, like blog post and then like say you're writing a product, like an ebook or something that you're
Okay.
gonna, you know.
So your question was?
Oh, how do you approach those two different pieces of writing? How do you approach them differently? Do you, I mean, approach them in the same way you would write a blog post, the same way you would write a product, content for a product, or are there differences?
I think the main parts are the same. So I start with the promise of the product if I'm writing the product, which is the headline of an article, or the problem I'm solving. And then I start outlining what I want the product to be about, or what the problems are that people are having. So I'm always outlining and wanting to get an overview of something before I start creating it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I'm writing an ebook, then I'll write a horrible first draft. So I'll go through and write the whole thing and come back and rewrite it. But if it's a video course, then I'll have an outline in place and I want to make sure all the puzzle pieces fit together. So if I have 10 videos, I want to make sure they fit together before I start recording the videos. So I'll just outline, put in like subheadings, and it's the same process really.
Okay. So you don't change anything at all for each of them. I mean, it's basically the same. You approach content creation in the same way, like entirely.
Yeah, obviously some things change if you compare articles to creating a video course, but I think the basic building blocks are the same, because you want to make sure you're as concise as possible and that you're addressing the things that your readers or customers want addressed. And really the best way to do that is to make sure you have an outline in place and that you don't go on tangents if you don't have to.
Got you. Awesome. Thank you.
So if you have extra questions, then I think you are allowed to ask a few more.
No, I don't have any extra questions. I'm questioned out. I think that my brain can't handle any more answers.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure having you on, and maybe we can do something similar in the future where you report how you used some of these things. That way you'll be accountable as well, won't you?
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
So let's say just one thing. You can pick one thing and not the whole thing, because that's a bit overwhelming, but you can pick the whole thing. And I think you can do it if you drink enough green tea.
I got to get me one of those kettles, right? Or filters. I think I'll definitely pick the outlining because I think that's really, really important. And then I will try for the rest of them. But I definitely want to start with the outlining and the questions, because I think that's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, I think the outlining is one of the most important parts, and it really makes the article writing so much easier, at least for me. And something that just occurred is that in the outline, if you're having trouble writing, you can turn like the what, why, when, how stuff into questions. So if you think about the questions people might have, like if you're writing about how to pick the best blender, then the questions could be, why is it important to pick the best blender? Like, what's the difference between the best blender and the worst one? And then how do you pick the best one? What's the biggest mistake you can make? And just turn them into questions, because when we're asked questions, answers just come forth.
Yeah, so true. That's even better. I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, good note to end on.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
So if people want to find out more about you, could you tell them your website once again? Because you have some awesome content there that I think people should check out.
Yeah, it's alifeonyourterms.com. And you can find me right there.
Awesome. So again, thanks for doing this, having this conversation. It was a true pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for letting me pick your brain. I appreciate it.
And that brings us to the end of this interview and this episode. I hope you enjoyed the writing tips. And remember, when you use these writing tips, you will write faster and better articles. So make sure you pick one tip that resonates with you and use it right away. And if you want more tips on writing and on how to turn your passion into a thriving lifestyle business, visit wakeupcloud.com and make sure you join the free newsletter for lots of goodies. So that's all for this episode. This is Henry signing out. See you in the next episode.